So before we start, let me just see you guys. Please introduce yourself in the comment section, just so that we are waiting till it's exactly it's 8 p.m. your time. So let me just see your names. My name is Okenfo Ajayi, like I mentioned. I'm the founder of Busy Mind Center Limited. We have a nursery, primary, and secondary school. We have an entrepreneurship center, and that's where this comes in. Teacher training for us is important, and school leadership training is important as well. We also help people set up their school businesses, manage their school businesses as well. So yeah, that's exciting. I also work in the project management space as a business analyst. So being an educator is not in any way a limitation, and we should see being an educator as a tool to really reach high into some areas we didn't even imagine that we may need to go. That's how I see education. That's how I use education generally. I use it as a tool. So many different times in my journey, I've met people simply because they heard me maybe speak somewhere, and I always come from a teaching perspective, because I realize that not everybody knows things. There are times where I'm actually expecting people to know a bit more than they do. And so just being able to share and unlock the minds of people is something that is critically important to me as a person. So I see myself as a teacher through and through, and it's exciting to be able to share this evening with everyone. So thanks, Benga, for introducing yourself. Can everybody else just introduce themselves? Infinix Hot Note, can you please change your name? If you don't know how to change it, please type your name into the chat and we will change it for you. But we shouldn't really be having, Infinix Hot Note. Yeah, we're professionals and we should show that we're professionals. So I'm just going to take off with this session because I know that it's I think 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock your time. Yes, so it's a Saturday evening. We all want to just take a break, right? One of the reasons why we put this session at this time in the academic calendar, not in terms of PM and AM, is because we're going towards the end of the term. So people are setting questions. People are beginning to wrap up the term. People are thinking, oh, you know what should I set? What shouldn't I set? We want my children to do well in assessments. Can we make that happen? And that's why we said, it's a great time to put this session here, because I believe personally that people see assessments in a different way from how assessments should be seen. Before we started the recording, I was going to share that when I started learning how to drive, and I didn't learn from a hi Glory, it's really good to have you here again. I didn't learn from a driving school. So my brothers started to teach me how to learn how to drive. And it's like they wanted to start teaching me and they wanted me to start driving literally immediately. Was it possible? Because first of all, I was afraid I was going to wreck the car. So many things going through my head, and I was worried about it. So I wasn't coping very well with my brother's driving me. So one of my brother's friends, like our family friend, to be honest, like my brother, because him and my brother are best friends. They're still best friends till now. That's how many years later. They're like I said, he's like family. All of them in their house are like family. So he was like, you know what, let me teach her. And that's how he started teaching me how to drive. And I got better at it, And the method in which he taught me was very different from my brothers. My brothers were like, just drive it now. It's not a big deal. But he would be like, you know what? He first of all explained the mechanics of the car, and then drove and said, you know what? Watch me driving. I've watched people driving. I've been in a car. I've been in cars many times. I learned how to drive. I started learning how to drive in 1987. And I was eventually able to drive myself and I know a few other people in 1988, so I've been driving for a while. And at that time, I knew how I've been watching people. I knew how well people drove, I've been in cars, I've been in buses, I've been around. So I knew how to drive, how people drove. So it wasn't like I had to watch somebody drive to know how to drive, So good evening, Anastasia. It's great to see you here. So of course I knew how to drive. Hi, Felix. But then when I sat down and started watching him, and then he would say, I'm going to change the gear now. Did you notice that when I changed the gear, the car moved faster? And so he was sort of taking me through that process. And it began to make sense. the way the car was functioning became a function of what Oro, his name is Oro was doing. And I'm like, okay, so when you do this, this happens. It's not a matter of just do it to just happen. No, because you do A, then B happens. And that was something that began to make sense to me. So it helped me understand that I was in control, right? And just knowing that I was in control unlocked a lot of doors for me. It meant that if I didn't go fast, the car wouldn't go fast. If I didn't turn left, the car wouldn't turn left, right? And that in itself gave me a lot of confidence regarding being in a car and driving the car. Yeah. So that was something that was important for me as a person. And that's the same thing I think about when I think about assessments. When students are in your classroom, they're not in your classroom because you know how to teach. No, they're in your classroom because they need to learn. However, they really are the ones that determine the learning, but you provide an environment within which those children can learn. So it is very important that you set goals regarding your environment, what you're going to put in that environment, and how the children, are you going to make sure that the children are taken out of the environment what they need to. And those are things that are very interesting and important. Hi, Mrs. Kufre. It's great to see you here, right? So it's not enough to just say, the children in my classroom, they must learn. No, how are they going to learn? It's not enough to say, I've taught it. They should understand it. No. Why would they understand it? What have you put in place to make sure that they understood it? I know how many times, like I said, my brothers were the ones that started teaching me how to drive, right? Before Oro took over. And then I learned faster. So why was I learning under Oro and not with my brothers? With my brothers, I was shaking like a leaf. I was so afraid, I was so afraid. Simply because of goals, right? He knew the goal. The goal was this person needed to learn how to drive. How will we get this person there? He then had a strategy that he put into place. One was make the person comfortable with the car. How do you make the person comfortable with the car, right? By showing the person all of these different things about this car that they may not have been intentionally and aware of, right? And in just doing that, I was then able to engage, I was able to relate, and I started driving. Like I drive cross country, cross interstates, So why? Because of the method, the approach. So much as I was the one driving, like the way it is your students that are doing the learning, they're the ones doing the assignment, copying the notes, reading the books, but you are the one that is channeling things, right? The job of the radio is to what? Play something. If you don't tune that radio, it doesn't matter what the radio is playing or what it is capable of. Without you tuning it, nothing is going to happen. And if that's all you take away from this session, it's enough. It's enough to understand the fact that, yes, the children are in the class to learn. Yes, they came to your school to experience learning in its totality. But at the end of the day, you are the one that is going to make sure that learning happens, that what should happen does happen. Yeah. And so let's get deeper into this. Hi, Chooks. It's great to see you. We're going to, hi, Mr. Coyote. It's great to see you as well. We're going to use a lot of breakout rooms in this session. Maybe not a lot, but we will do breakout rooms. And what would happen in the breakout rooms is everybody will be assigned to a breakout room. And then you guys are supposed to come up with certain things as we go on in the session. Okay, most directly related to assessment as a tool for unlocking student success. Yeah. So the first thing really, and it'll be great for you guys to be very retrospective about this. So think about it, be very reflective, because I really like people to think. And the first thing is, what are the goals of the students in your classroom as a group, and then for individuals? Your whole group, right? Your whole group. I want the children in my classroom to understand addition and carrying. So you add and then you carry, so dynamic addition, not static, where there's no carrying involved. So dynamic addition, I need my children to understand dynamic addition. Okay, great. How are you going to make sure that KK, Titi, Apollos, Chooks, Kufri, Anastasia, each of these children understanding by a dynamic addition. That is the purpose. That's the goal I'm talking about. Your strategy is that your big picture for your classroom. For you to begin to take action, you must see each child as an individual. Is it difficult? Yes. Right? Which is why we do grouping. I'm not going to focus on a lot of grouping in this classroom because that's not the purpose. But one of the, I mean, if you were in the School Rewired conference, I believe that we had sessions that dealt with student profiling and things like that. So it's important for you to be able to profile your students. What you are then able to do is create categories of learners within your classroom. That way, that strategy, instead of doing it child by child, it's easier for you to then sort of group children, even though you would have individual differences and preferences, but it's easier for you to sort of deploy a strategy in a whole group, have an action for maybe 4 groups than have actions for 30 people. Yes, so that's sort of how you need to begin to think about it. But if you have a notebook, and you should, I really need you to write on that notebook, what is the goal for each of your classrooms? Now, you may not be, and when I say classrooms, I mean your lessons. So math class, English class, science class, social studies class, chemistry class, physics class. You need to be able to write them down. It is extremely important. Normally, what happens in a school is that you have a lesson, you have a big picture document, which is your curriculum framework. Your curriculum framework is typically broken down into year groups. So year 1, year 2, year 3. Each year group plus preschool is then further broken down into lessons. Okay, it's broken down into terms, right? And each term is broken down into lessons. Each lesson is then broken down into weeks. That's how it works. So you have this huge curriculum framework, which is it's a big picture, right? So that's like a really high level sort of document. Each year group then takes their piece out of the pie of the big curriculum. And what then begins to happen is that gets broken down. So let me stop this share and use a whiteboard for this illustration so that we can just sort of get into it. Yeah, welcome to all the newbies that just joined. It's great to have you here. We have, we started the class at exactly this assigned time, or rather the scheduled time. I like keeping to time. I think it's a hallmark of professionalism to be able to keep to time. Yeah. So this is the whiteboard that we're going to be using today. Let me know once you can see it, please. Yeah, you can just put it in the chat box that we can see, or yes, I can see it, and that'll be great. Okay, although I do get that you can see it from fantastic. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so the first stage of this, yes, is your big picture. Okay, so this is your big curriculum document. It's for the entire school. It's a really big picture, and usually it has everything for preschool to secondary school, depending on the levels that you have in your school. It has all of that. This document, we then take it further, right? And each of the mini groups, preschool, nursery 1, nursery 2, year 1, year 2, year 3, reception, each of them takes a portion of that big document, right? And then it becomes their document. Now, what they get when they get it is that it is for 1 year or 1 academic cohort. Okay, it's for 1 year or 1 academic cohort. That's what they get. But that's not how we teach, right? Yes, we know that learning is a continuum, and children can basically just take that document and flow across that document in different methods because it's a continuum. But that's not how we teach. We teach in what? Term 1, and that's another break that we have. So we'll have term 1, term 2, and term 3. Term 1 is further broken down into what? Half term, which is A, and then half term, which is B. Same happens here. Each of these is further broken down into what? Subjects. So subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, across the 3 terms. Each of these subjects is again further broken down into what? Weeks. And I'm sure you guys get the picture, because this is how we work with our curriculum documents, isn't it? Now, it is important as you are breaking these down. Yes, as you're breaking this down, you need to say, what is my goal? But a lot of the times, that's the part where we sort of don't carry it through. So yes, we've broken it down. We have it in weeks, the subject areas, we know the scheme of work, but do we then take that scheme of work, that week scheme of work for maybe week 1 and 2, maybe it spans across 2 weeks, and say, what is my goal for my learning categories in my classroom? Not the curriculum goal, because curriculum goal is big. The thing with curriculum goal, right, is when you have this typically is what the children can know. Yes, that's how it is. In a particular subject, there are all these things you can know. Let me take our telephone. With this telephone, all the things I can know about this telephone, I don't even think I know a quarter of those things. Actually, I think a quarter is a big one. 1/10, I don't think I know what it is about this phone. However, I am meant to know those things. Reality, yes, is what is important for the children to know, and what they would learn is different. So what is important for the child to know? Maybe this much. Yeah, maybe this much. All of these, the portion in red, it's not that they're unimportant. It's important. But you see, they are not core memory. They're not core learning areas, not core memory. They're not core learning areas, right? So it's a lot. It's like when I'm teaching the children about the solar system, I'm talking about the solar system because I just added it to the slide. When I'm talking about the solar system, there's a lot that I bring out about the solar system. But do they need to know everything about the solar system? The answer is no. What they really need to know, right, and be able to generatively use, because that's the purpose, right? That's what success is. What can the child use generatively? The child use in moving forward. So I know how to drive now. What am I using my driving for? I use it to move my car around. I use it to take myself shopping, take my children out, take my husband out, go visit somewhere. That's what I use it for, right? So that driving skill that I've learned, it becomes generative when I'm able to use it. Yes, so that's what it should be in your classroom. But there's another level here. Now, what is it that this child actually would be able to use? Okay, so there is what I should know about the subject area. There is then the core subject area, which we would say the more important point in this subject area that, it's, I need to cover this in my curriculum. However, because you covered it doesn't mean the child needs to know it. Yes, there are things that are called threshold concepts. This area in yellow are your threshold concepts. If you teach nothing at all, you must teach to a high degree, an extremely high degree, your threshold concepts. What are your threshold concepts? Your threshold concepts are those concepts that, imagine that you are standing at a door. You are either stepping forward into that door and entering a new area, or you stay at that door, or you step back. Those are your 3 options. Option 1 is move forward. Option 2 is stay in place. Option 3 is move backwards. Those are the 3 options. And think about your classroom. You have these in your classroom, don't you? Yes or no? You finish teaching, there's some people that move forward. You finish teaching, some people stay in the same place. You finish teaching, it's almost like some people move backwards. Are you saying we haven't experienced this in our classrooms? We have. Think about it. Think about yesterday, the day before, 3 days ago. It happens. It happens all the time in our classrooms. The question is, how are we going to move them across that threshold? Is by ensuring that you teach, I've used here, I'm going to go and change the color. It's ensuring that you do not lose sight of the threshold concepts. If a child doesn't adequately understand that yellow part, that threshold concept, it is difficult for them to use the blue, because the threshold concepts are what tie in the blue area. It is what makes sense of the red area. Once I understand a concept, addition, for example, is a concept. What are the concepts children absolutely have to understand? And these are your threshold concepts. In math, you think about operations, right? What are the 4 operations that you have in mathematics, right? So those are the things that you need to begin to think about. In English, what are those core concepts the children need to know? Why? Because no matter where they go, they would always come to those core concepts. And if there's a fault in those core concepts, it's a problem. It's difficult for them to move forward. They would always need your support. Always, or the support of the next teacher. And that's not what you want. So what we need to do is say to ourselves, what are the goals? What are these goals? Oh, did I just do stop share? What are these goals that we absolutely need to give to the children? That is your responsibility in the classroom. You need to be able to define that goal very clearly and take your students towards that goal. Otherwise, they will not get it. They would struggle with it. And that is not great. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on forward. I wanted to make sure that I said all of these things because I feel that that's the most important part, honestly, of this session. Why is this important? And let me give you an example with that core concept that I showed to you. Yeah. This document, this right here, is critical in core concepts. Solar system is a concept. What do they need to know about the solar system? This is a fishbone diagram. For those of you who are in the WhatsApp group, there's sometime this year, I'm not sure when, I explained, or was it in the school where, I'm not sure, in one of the WhatsApp groups that we manage, we explained the fishbone concept and how to use the fishbone concept in goal setting. You need to be able to use this fishbone concept. You have to. If you cannot use this concept, you cannot define your threshold areas. So this fishbone, yeah, becomes how you define those core concepts that you absolutely must hit. With this fishbone here, you will definitely have, like we say, children and grandchildren. Yeah. So under this one, you then have other smaller areas that you need to cover. These main concepts are your core areas. These are the yellow areas. You must define those yellow areas. These other areas are the blue areas. Remember that diagram that I drew? Yeah, there was the big red circle, which is solar system. You then have the red areas, and then you have the yellow. The yellow areas need to be your definition points for those blue areas, so that you know that everything that you give in the red, yes, become activities and examples that drive home the yellow. I'm going to go back and forth in the slides, but follow me. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning now. Right, fantastic. Just stay with me. Stay with me. Don't go anywhere. Stay with me. Yes, it's important that we do this. I need to be able to do this so that I can take you guys to where we, absolutely need to go to in this session. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Well, not the full beginning, but part of the beginning. Okay, so why is this session important? We're going towards the end of the term, right? At the end of the term, parents are expecting something. But the question is, what are we doing? What have we done throughout the term that gives us the right to create an assessment to judge the children and their learning goals? If we haven't even set the right goals in the first place, if we don't even have or know the right goals to set, are we really morally, should we be setting those goals? We don't know what success is. We haven't defined success, but yet we want the children to write in a way that indicates success. What success is that? Is it 90 over 100? Is it 10 over 100? What is success? You must be able to define that. Otherwise, are we teaching amiss? That's my question. Yes. So let's go on with this. So this is a question that I'm asking. So let me see your yes or your no in the chat box. Have you ever run out of assessment strategies? That's what am I going to teach today? How should I teach this thing? Has this ever happened to you? You're trying to assess children in a sense where you just taught something and you're looking for which way how should I assess it? Can I see yes or no in the chat box, please? Yeah. or thumbs up, the thumbs down. If you don't want to type, maybe you don't feel like typing, but it'll be great to see some form of reactions. Are we in this class? Am I alone in this class? Okay, thank you, Anastasia. Not often. Great. I love that. Okay, fantastic. So I love the not often, I love the yes, I love the no. Truth is, it happens, right? It happens from time to time. There are times where you're like, how am I going to assess this thing? What kind of question should I set for this thing now? Now you're thinking about it. So it happens, right? Which is why you need to have that plan, like I've just put in place. That fishbone diagram that I showed you, you should be able to use that fishbone diagram across different areas. The same way you have that fishbone diagram, right, that has the core concepts, use it for your assessments. Every time you are creating that fishbone diagram, based on the goals that you have set, the success markers that you have put in place, you should be able to put in questions and say, what am I going to assess? What should the children know in these areas? Write it down. That becomes the basis of how you teach. Because that's really what assessment is. Assessment is checking. Whether it's the formative assessment or is the summative assessment, we are checking what we said they should know. Do they know it? What I said I would teach, how effective was I? That's what we're checking. And so what are we trying to check? And how should we be checking it? That's really the question, right? So they're always learning goals. And that's what I've just said to you. We need to be able to define our lesson goals appropriately. When we define our lesson goals appropriately, we will have the right set of activities. That's jumping down to the lighter shade of blue. Can't remember what that shade is called. Forgive me. We should be able to have the right learning activities to give context and deepen those goals. All right? Based on that, we should be able to assess the skills that each activity builds for our students. So you're looking at your learning goals and you're saying, based on these goals, what am I going to do to ensure that these children can get it? That is activity. That's why we say activity-based learning. Activity-based learning is not to keep the children running around in the classroom. No. It's not to keep the children talking in the classroom. No. Activity-based learning is to ensure that the goals are tied in with a relatable method so that when it is time to ask a question, we know that they will be able to answer that question because we can see through each activity that we gave them that they were able to do it. That is the importance of a learning activity. And we need to begin to use it appropriately. We see a lot of learning activities in preschool. How much of it do we see in primary, in secondary? Not a lot. As children go older, it's almost like we get into that space where we are wondering, do we need to have activities? We need to have activities. It's important. Your activities is what drives that learning. Yes? What is the purpose of assessments? I've said it just now, evaluating, feedback so that we can improve, and then to inform decision making. How important is this thing in the curriculum? Seriously, do we need to step it back, right? Because there was a time where, this was many years ago, there was a concept, I can't remember what it was right now, but there was a concept the children needed to know in year 5/year 6 because of common entrance. And we realized that concept in the curriculum only came in year 3, third term. So from year 3, third term, year 4, year 5, for us, it was like, if these children need to use and be assessed externally about on this, I can't remember the concept now, on this concept in year 5, and for some who will not go to year 6, will 1 year be enough to ground these students? And the answer was no. Thanks for that, Robert. The answer, to be honest, was no. And so we had to sit down, and that's where decision making comes in. And we had to take back the curriculum all the way to reception. Reception for us is 4 to 5 because we use the National Curriculum of England. And so we had to step it back to age 4 to 5, right? The early learning part of that concept, we needed to ensure that it was visible. Visible enough meant ensuring that it became a core concept because it was absolutely something that needed to be assessed, right? And in stepping that back, it immensely helped. Actually, we not only stepped back that concept, we then had to look through the entire curriculum and say, what is it that we needed to do, and step back, right? So our curriculum over the years has evolved. It always evolves. It's very flexible tool for us. It's not our Bible. And it's a tool because it's supposed to drive student learning. Now, the question is what should the student be learning? Right? And those definitions, those standards exist. But the way they exist keeps changing over time. Right? What is successful right now in the world that we live in today is very different from what is success in five years ago. So we need to constantly be able to define those areas. Assessment is what helps you do that. Okay, so think about those activities. Think about assessment as that tool that you need to create the right environment for learning in your classrooms. It's very, very important. I'm just going to stop share because there's something on the screen that I don't know how I got it there with all my tweaking, and then I'll just come back. If you have any questions at any point in time, feel free to drop it in the chat and I will pick it up from the chat. So please feel free. Don't assume that you have to wait to a certain time when we say question and answers and then you suddenly ask questions. Please don't do that. Bring it up and I'll be more than happy to jump in. So that assessment, again, as we're going to the end of towards the end of the puzzle, towards the end of the term, the parents are waiting for that puzzle piece to drop, right? And they're waiting for that puzzle to drop to see how their children have done. So what then happens is that a lot of schools get under pressure. They get under pressure to under-assess, okay? With assessments, there's a desirable level of difficulty. What does that mean? It means that when you draw the graph, right? Assessment is a science. I actually had to take, I took a course on assessments in 2017 or 2018. I actually took a course. A 5 days residential course, crazy course. We started at 8 o'clock every day. And we didn't end some days 10 p.m. It was mad, crazy. There's a curve when we look at assessments, okay? And that curve, yes, there would always be more people in this middle than here and here. If you have more people, you know what, let me use the one that stays so that I can use that to explain. We must be data-driven. That's the reality. In our schools, in the way that we think, we must be data-driven. We can't just be doing things because of doing sake. No, that's not, I don't work like that. I work based on data, and we need to begin to imbibe that in our schools. Now, this is a normal distribution curve, right? And then we do this. More people should be here, and that's a desirable level of difficulty. It means that it was very difficult for some people. It was easier for some people, but majority of the students got it. If you have too many people here, that's a problem. That's a faulty distribution. This distribution is wrong. If you have too many people here failing it, that again is a faulty distribution. That's wrong. Because it means when it is on the right, and there are more people on that right lower curve. So let's do it 1, 2, 3. If you have very many people in number 1, it means that it was too difficult. They couldn't get it. And that's not okay. If you have many people in number 3, it was too easy. Which is why number 2 is the right space where you should have more people distributed there. That is a normal distribution curve. Okay, and it's normal in very many things in life. That's why we hear things like the top 1%, the top 3%, the top yadi yadi da. That's just that's life. Okay, so if your school is not typifying life and your assessment scores are not typifying life, then there's a problem. There must be a desirable level of difficulty, right? So that piece really is what determines the direction of your lessons. That is why I said have that fishbone diagram. You don't have to use the fishbone diagram. You can do whatever it is and use whatever tool you want to use. But it's just important to be able to define your threshold concepts, yes, and then understand the core that they need to know based off of the threshold. Use that core as your activities. And what then happens is in all the other areas, the children will be able to handle whatever questions comes from there because you have the core. All the others are application. That's it. All the others are typically application of that core, which is where the generative knowledge comes in. Yes, so do you need to reteach the students, or are they ready to progress? Again, that distribution curve lets you know. Yes, and then you know how to manage that classroom, and then which student needs additional practice. Those are the decisions. Those are the insights that you gain from having the right assessment tool. So it's really important that you are mindful of how you teach in your classrooms. Many times, so because I work in the consulting capacity for quite a number of schools, you know, most of them in Nigeria, I get to see the back end of the work that a lot of teachers do. And the back end means that, and that's the major problem, you know, a lot of my clients talk about. In these parents or these teachers, the children will just fail. When I look at the broadsheet, and you know, my question is always, how are the teachers teaching it? How much of a connection exists between how I said it in class and how I wrote it in the assessment? And sometimes, to be honest, 60% of the time, there is not as tight as a connection as it should be. We assume that if we use addition when we are talking in class and we use sum in an assessment, the children will understand. They will not. You did not teach them addition. Sorry, you did not teach them sum. You did not teach them and. You did not even say plus. But suddenly, in an exam setting that already there's tension, the child is meant, they will not know it. And that will reflect negatively on their scores. And then when you call them, I can say, but if you add it, what do you get? They'll be like, oh, you get this. And they get like, why did you not write it? They didn't write it because they didn't know that's what you meant. If you have not taught it, don't assess it. If you have not taught it in a certain way, do not set the exams in a certain way. It's wrong. And it puts you under the sort of pressure you have no business being under. Because you'll be wondering if you did a good job. And you did. You just forgot the fact that you were assessing. And that's why from the very beginning, plan your assessments, plan your activities, even plan your vocabulary. It's a plan. When you plan it appropriately, it's easier to follow through. When you even miss it, you know when to come back to. It's important. You need to have a plan as a teacher. Now, these are 3 quick tips. Always match your assessments with the subject's learning goals. I think I've said it so many times, and I'm going to keep saying it like a broken record because it's important. Match those assessments with the learning goals. If you have not clearly defined your learning goals, please do. This can link back, yes, Toby, absolutely. It can, and it does link back to effective lesson planning. Absolutely, it does. Thank you for bringing that up. Use varied assessment tools as much as possible. Sometimes the way we ask questions in the exam is different from the way we ask questions in the classrooms. We rarely use true or false in the classrooms, but it comes out in exams. True or false is not even a great tool to use. We do not use, you know, the things that we just use in exams that becomes exam lingo. It should not be exam lingo. The child will not get it. Meanwhile, when the children go to common entrance classrooms and WAEC classes, we are using question papers to teach in the class. Why? So that they are used to it. But then, if it is not in these classrooms, we're not as mindful of these nuances. And that's not okay. Robert says, students who need additional practice, are they also the ones with special? No. So some children just learn differently. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have neurodiverse needs. So yes, some of them do have neurodiverse needs, right? Instead of, to be honest, all of us have special needs. So I don't like to use the term special needs. We all have special needs, but neurodiversity is things that you see like ADHD and dyslexia. So yes, some children have it, but some don't. Some are just lazy. Some are just not ready developmentally. It doesn't mean that they're not going to get there. Some just expect that it will just happen magically, you know. And, you know, also children are fantastic. They're all just different reasons why you begin to see this sort of additional practice across different children. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're neurodiverse. All right, so let's keep note of it. And there was a certain child that taught me this. When we just started in 2013, we started in April. In September, a child joined us. And as soon as she came in September, it was a nightmare. This child was, my God, she was everywhere, climbing. She was so unsettled. I personally said to my team, I said, I think this girl has, she's on the autistic spectrum. I said, because these things I'm seeing. So I sat down and I said to myself, we were small enough then, so I could do observations more frequently than I can now. So I sat down in the classroom over a couple of days and I observed this child. And when I observed this child, I just realized that because of the way we're free in class, and there's a lot of movement involved in the work that we do, and she had never seen that. She was used to just sitting in the classroom. It was almost like her chain was clipped off, right? So that's what we were seeing playing out. After the first half term, she settled a bit more, and this child kept settling. She settled to the point that there was no question you would ask in the classroom that this child did not, initially, she would not even hear it, talk less of comprehending and responding. But she became so settled within a space of maybe about 8 to 10 weeks, 12 weeks. It was like magic, right? So sometimes the children are just not normalized, right? And that's what we need to say to ourselves. If this child is normalized, how will they act? And then we need to say to ourselves, what are the areas that we are seeing that are non-normalized? And say to ourselves, how do we help this child to normalize? That's a different conversation entirely. All right. So I don't want to sort of take us away too far from this conversation that we're having. But that is something that we need to think about. Yes. How do we ensure that children are normalized? And how do we ensure that our activities in our classrooms actually helps them normalize quicker? Okay. That's something that is important. But thank you very much for that question, Robert. Fantastic, fantastic question. All right. And then always put the learners at the heart of the things that you do. What are assessment categories? These are typical assessment categories. Yes, especially when I say assessments, I'm talking about mostly summative assessments. So we use true or false, yes or no, fill in the blanks, enumerate, bonus, multiple choice. These are sort of assessment categories that we have. How effective are these in our classrooms? And we'll look at that today. I've already talked about the importance of the outcome, the assessment, and the activity. That's what you see in that triangle. This is anytime I talk about assessments, I sort of always bring this up because it is so important. So important. We need to be able to say, what is the outcome? What is the activity? And how do we assess it? Or what are we going to assess? Which is, what do we want to see? And what activity will bring that up? It's really important that we have this in place. Okay. So again, in the linear format, you have the learning goal, you have the assessment evidence. What evidence do we need to support the fact that learning has happened? We need to define this. It's not defined by the question paper at the end of the term. It's defined before that. It's when we define it before that we then know what assessment evidence we need to see, and we teach it to ensure that it comes out. Otherwise, we won't do it. We will just make an assumption that they will understand it. Okay, and that's where your objective comes. What is the value the child needs to derive from this class? That's the question you should be asking yourself. We should be asking ourselves, to be honest. Yes, and based on that, we then have those activities. We have both formative and summative assessments that then drive or show us that assessment evidence. But there's the learning goal, then there's the assessment evidence. What is assessment evidence? When you hear things like success criteria, those are assessment evidence. Success criteria for me that I can use a telephone is that I will make a call, I would send a text message, maybe use some of the apps. Those are my success criteria, right? That I can use a particular phone. For somebody else, it might be a different success criteria, but I need to define my success criteria. That's the only way that I'm sure that my learning goals are going to be met. And those success criteria must be tied to those learning goals. Yes, is that understandable? I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide because it's very, it's a technical slide. Yes, so but it's something that is important to talk about. And some of it I've already spoken. Joel says, I feel assessments should center around, absolutely. They should center around learning objectives. Those are your learning goals. Your learning goals are your learning objectives, right? So when you talk about your learning objectives, what are the assessment evidence that you need to see? which is the success criteria. So yes, absolutely. Thank you for that, Joel. That's extremely important. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. Very important. Yeah. So again, how will you know learning has occurred? You need to have criteria or indicators, which is just what Joel just said, and then exemplars, right? It needs to be that you need to have that evidence. Otherwise, you will not know that learning has occurred, which is why you put assessments in place. Yeah, but beyond assessments, if you had activities that the children just doing those activities helps you know whether or not they've learned, then it helps you understand, it helps you know what the children are learning faster and what you need to fix faster. All right. And then how do we collect the evidence? All of those are written there. But we'll talk about this as we go along. Okay. So thank you for that point. I'm only putting this here again because it is one of my badges. I always put it. And it's important because when you're creating your assessments, you need to have this as your feedback mechanism. Actually, every teacher should have this stuck on their table, on their desk in the classroom. You want your children in the space of higher order thinking, not in remembering and understanding. But I will show you an assessment for a particular school that I work with, and you will tell me whether or not there's anything that has to do with analyzing, evaluating, or creating. Most of those assessments, the questions in that exam are remembering and understanding. And if children are in that space, they're never going to think. Never. So they get into a class and you twist the question a little bit and they're lost. They don't even know what you're talking about because we're not encouraging them to think. We need to encourage children to think. There are 4 pillars of assessments: purpose, reliability, validity, and value. And I'm going to go a bit further. The first is purpose. Why? That's the question. Like Toby said, the learning objective. What is it? What do you want to measure? Why do you want to measure it? That's the purpose. You need to be able to ask yourself that question. It's in this that you begin to actually think about your assessment evidence. You need to begin to say, is this really the right learning goal? And then the third question is, have you selected the right tool for measuring it? What type of test can measure a student's ability? For example, this is an example, and you will need to answer this. There's a question after this. What type of test question can measure a student's ability to know the exact answer? Right? Fill in the blank. Or what type? Sometimes we might think that exactly, Coyote, it has to, right? Which is why at the beginning I mentioned, Coyote, that if you haven't taught it in a certain way, you really shouldn't assess it in that way. Because if you didn't present it to the classroom or to the students in a certain way, they can't understand it. So your presentation and your activities must be tied together, right? To that learning goal you want to see, that evidence you want to see. Otherwise, when you put together the assessment, it's going to be faulty. So in your planning, so let me share that. Let me share something else now. And I love the way we are bouncing these ideas off each other. I think it's fantastic. In your planning, you need to be able to say to yourself, what assessments am I going to put in place? Okay, so let me share. I'm going to share a Word document now. This is not a very good example, but let's just use it like that. Now, you see, we have the introduction, we have the direct instruction. This is actually how you're going to teach it. Yes, we have the activities that you have put in place, which are practice, right? And then there's independent practice. So we have 2 levels of practice. This initial practice is us doing it together, yeah, either as a group or you are walking around assisting the students, and then you want the children to be able to practice it independently. Yes, after that, you need to then, within these examples, you see where we have question here, you should have questions. Like I said, it's not a very good example. Fortunately, I couldn't pull out any other one. You should honestly have questions across each of these activity areas. Okay, so if you teach the child in physical education, tennis, how to walk you know, playing tennis, yeah, lawn tennis. The activities that you have around lawn tennis should become part of the assessments for your classroom, for that particular subject, because that is what the children will understand. There's something called a core memory. A core memory is something you can never forget. You can never forget how to click on a Zoom link and get on Zoom, because your core memory has been activated. You have done it so many times, it has become a part of you. Your core memory is also your name. I don't think anybody will walk into a room right now and say, okay, Ifu, and I will not turn around. Even if I know nobody in that room, I know that there's nobody I know there. If I hear my name, I will turn around. That is a core memory that has been activated. What core memories are you activating in your classroom? Your core memories must be tied to the core of that subject, which are your threshold concepts. Your activities need to be memorable enough to drive home that core learning and activate the core memory. If you don't activate core memory, it cannot go to the long-term memory. It cannot. It would always be a working memory. So you must activate core memory, and core memory is activated with activities. That's why for the longest time, I didn't like to, there's a certain portion where we had an accident when I was driving one time. I wasn't even driving, my brother was driving. But for the longest time, when I started driving, I didn't like to drive past that road because I was afraid, right? It's a T junction. It's a very busy T junction. There's no traffic light, nothing. And so cars just fly, literally fly out of that road. So I was always very afraid to drive on that road but the alternative was quite far. There were two alternatives, but they were not as fast as that T junction. But I would avoid that T junction for the longest time because I remembered what happened on that road. And that was when I was going to do my first JAMB. We had an accident when they were bringing me back from the tutorial class for that JAMB, right? And the next day we had JAMB. I failed that JAMB because I was so shaken. And so that unlocked a core memory on the inside of me. Am I better? Of course. It's how many years ago? But walking past a T junction or driving past a T junction doesn't mean I don't remember. That is what an activity does. That was a negative thing that happened, but it unlocked a memory. You need to unlock the children's core memories, and your activities help you do that. Yes? So, these are different types of assessments, yes, that we would have. We'll look at them now. Based on purpose, fill in the blanks is it's a good one in terms of measuring the children's ability to know if an information is missing or not. So when you're looking at purpose, depending on what you want to measure, fill in the blanks is a good example. All right. So if you want to recall scientific facts and things like that, or you give them a passage, they listen to something, maybe you play it and then you pause and say, fill in the blanks based on this or answer these questions. That's a good one. Now, reliability. Okay. So we've looked at what purpose. What is the purpose of this assessment? Why? What is it for? What are you measuring? That is important. And all of this, to be honest, it still ties into your plan. Because if you're not teaching what is important, why are you teaching it? What's the value in that teaching? Because we just need to cover the curriculum. It's not okay. But then when you are assessing, you don't assess that part. Because you then suddenly realize, what I should be assessing is this. So that's not okay. There needs to be a synergy. There has to be a synergy. If not, we are creating children who are they're not really learning, right? And that's not okay. So reliability, how effectively do the questions measure the student's skills? And this, again, it ties to how you have phrased the questions. That's why somebody mentioned here, I think that was it Robert? No, it wasn't Robert. Somebody that said it, where is it? Kayode, I feel assessments should center around the presentations and the activities of the students as well. Yeah. If you are not assessing it in the way that you taught it, how reliable is your teaching? And how reliable is this assessment? Another thing is an element of bias, right? Is there bias? Like the children can misinterpret that question you have set or something you have set, or you're only setting that question or saying it, teaching in that way, and only a few of the children understand, not everybody. We need to think like that when we're setting assessments. Okay? And these sort of assessments in terms of reliability are not great. When you say things like use all of the above, use none of the above, sometimes children don't understand it. They just go and just circle. They don't understand what it is because we don't talk like this in class. None of the above is good. Who says that in their Nobody really talks like that. At least not on a regular basis, that it becomes something that the children understand. So we need to be careful with how we set these questions and how we ask these things. Yeah, so it is really not advisable to use that. Use plausible distractors is better, okay? And then how valid is this assessment? Should all the topics be covered in an assessment? That's a question you need to answer, right? Is it even ethical to this thing that you're asking the child? Should they even be answering it? We need to be able to ask ourselves that question, right? And again, in terms of validity, when you ask an open-ended question, especially in the theory part of the question, ask them to explain it in 2 or 3 sentences, 2 to 3 sentences. Write it like that. Because that way, you even as a teacher are not tired in reading what they are writing. And you're actually giving appropriate feedback because you've taken the time to study what these children have said. Otherwise, they're tired and you're tired. And that way, it's no more valid because there's a bias involved, even if the bias is your tiredness. All right? So true or false as well is effective in measuring higher order thinking skills. Is that true or is that false? The reality is that it's false. If you ask a child true or false, are they thinking? They're not thinking. There's no thought that is being provoked. So how reliable is that in really seeing that the child is thinking? That again, is a problematic type of assessment. Value, I've said this one a lot of times. A lot of times. Must you assess this? Must you assess it? It's not all the subjects that we assess in my school. And we let the parents know from the beginning. This particular class, it doesn't have an assessment because it's practical. There are some things that you just should not assess. It doesn't make sense. Assessing some sort of computer skills without the use of a computer, that's ridiculous. Why are you assessing it on paper? Why? It doesn't make any sense. Or assessing some music, or, there's just some things that they're of no value. No value. So if you focus on the things that are valuable, you create value streams. All right. So that's, again, something that we should be thinking about. So this sort of help, right, especially in terms of value, again, your project list will be all the things that maybe you want to teach, right? And then you sort of write them there. Your quick wins, or this doesn't, I put this here because it's an impact effort matrix. So you need to be able to say, what are your impacts and what's your efforts? And you can write here high value questions, medium value questions, time wasters, low value questions, and write them there and put the subject areas, the different subject areas in these places. And so you know that your high value questions, you make sure you set questions from there. Yeah, medium value questions, limit the number of questions that come from there. And then in some places, don't even ask questions at all. Ask it in the class as a formative assessment instead. Yes? So what are the tools that you use for formative assessment? So let's quickly do this one. I know that we're beginning to run out of time. We have just about 20, 30 minutes more. So let's look at this. Which should go, do we got, okay, so I don't even know, do you guys know what round robin is? I'm not even sure if we all know it. But we know think, pair, share, right? I'm not getting feedback as quickly. Okay, let me move on. Yes. so we might not know all of these things, but there are ways that, thank you very much for giving that. So there are ways that we can reuse them in the classrooms. Okay. Yes, think, pair, share is one that we use for some of them, but not all of them. So again, look at this, right? Your round robin is groups, right? So round robin is children take groups to answer questions and share. It's like a group. You ask one question and each child then has something to say. It's almost like it's not your show and tell, but imagine that you have a project. What round robin is you give everybody an assignment or something or a topic and say, oh, you guys go and learn this topic and tomorrow we'll discuss it. All right, then you use round robin. And then they all sit down in a group and talk about what they learned. That's round robin. Yeah, and then think per share, and it's a formative assessment. You're not grading it, but you're able to, again, assess maybe what you are checking is how are the children able to connect the concept you gave them and discuss it in class. That's what you might be checking, right? You're not checking if it's right or wrong. You might just be checking eloquence. This child can talk. That might be all that you're checking. You might be checking coherence. This child has a coherent thought pattern and their thoughts and their words are flowing. That might be why you are checking. Yeah. Think per share. Again, that's something that we use a lot. And then concept mapping. Yeah. So ask the child, instead of just saying, write a story, tell them, draw a map of your story for me and let them use a concept map. That's activating their thinking. All of these are formative assessments. They're tools, then there are many more tools that we can use for formative assessment. All right, so this just gives you a bit more. You will get some of these slides, so an abridged version, so you can read up on this later. And then let's go to summative assessment. Summative assessment is that it is summed up. That's it, okay? 1 over 10, 10 over 10, 20 over 20, that is summative. You sum it up at the end of the day. Now, these are tools that we usually use, our end of term exams or any exam, quizzes after each, maybe in class, we just teach something for 30 minutes, and then the children do 20 minutes of quiz, and then 10 minutes of feedback, quizzes, projects where the children can choose the projects by themselves, right? Choose the topic by themselves, or you assign a project, right? Those, again, are quantified, right? Because you add it up and say, if you do this in this project, almost like you have a rubric, you use this rubric to grade what you do on your project. Okay, and what it means is that you want to see a tangible output for what they have learned, unlike formative where it's not tangible. So that's the difference between formative and summative. Now, I've shown you guys this before, right? How do we use it? When you have created this, you then create your lesson plan and your lesson map following this thing that you have done. All right, based on that, and remember, I said under each of these planets, you then put in activities to drive it home. Based on the activities, you're then able to draw up a plan and say, this is what we are going to do, right? And another thing that you can do is have a separate sheet duplicated like this, but what will be under name of planet is a sort of assessment, sort of questions that you want to ask. Arrangement of planet, what questions do I want to ask, right? What is it that the children need to know? What do I want to assess? And you write them there so that you are planned from the very beginning. And that means that you have a roadmap to achieve what it is that you want to achieve. Yeah. So children are different. Don't get tired. All right. Children have different ways of learning, but it is us that need to be able to say, what are we assessing? What is the actual goal? How do we want to assess this? What is the purpose? Right? And how valid is it? That is how you really create assessment. But it all starts with your lesson plan. It starts with how you teach it. Okay, so remember what we said at the beginning, you need to have those goals. You need to define what success is. You must have success criteria, right? And then you must have a roadmap for achieving that success criteria. Otherwise, there's no chance that the child will arrive at the destination that you want them to arrive. It's not clearly stated. Well, they don't know it. You don't know it. So taking anybody there might be counterproductive. Yeah. Thank you all for this session. I'm hoping that we can do some question and answers. I didn't send us into breakout rooms because I can see that not everybody's network is great. So what would then happen is that I would have a problem with breakout rooms. So that's why I just scrapped the section about breakout rooms. But let's have, if there are any questions that you have, I'll be more than happy to take it. But you will get this recording. UT would share this recording with all of us. Yeah. Do we have questions? If you have a question, it's okay for you to unmute your mic and ask the question. Okay, so again, what is success? What are the learning goals? Yes, what are the
I have a question, ma.
Okay, please go ahead.
Question.
Okay. Go ahead, Felix.
All right. Good evening, ma.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you for the wonderful section. It's quite insightful. My question is this, ma.
Okay.
These ideas about assessment, about creative teaching, they're actually good ideas. But I observe from experience that when it comes to practice, particularly in the Nigerian school setting, it almost seems impracticable. You have
Okay.
you have the school extracurricular activities. You have teachers have deadline to submit one report to the other,
Mhm,
committee responsibility.
mhm.
You must teach your scheme. You must finish up your scheme before you know all those kind of routine
Yeah.
that characterize our schools, particularly
Mhm.
private schools. So it's almost seems impracticable to really apply these things. You have the short time to teach, let's say an average of 40 minutes.
Mhm.
My question now is, how can a teacher really manage to really put all these creative teaching, brilliant ideas together to
Okay.
make it visible in the classroom learning situation? That's my question.
Fantastic, fantastic question, Felix. So one of the reasons why I do this session is so that I can begin to change the mindsets regarding teaching the entire scheme of work. Sometimes the entire scheme of work has no business being the entire scheme of work. There's all sorts of things that are in there that have no business being in there. That's the first thing. But I approach education very differently. And there are a lot of schools in the
Okay.
private network that are changing, And so let me tell you that they are changing. I know that because I have quite a number of schools that I work with. So I see their mindsets changing about this. They're also doing a lot of parent education so that the parents too begin to understand that this thing that you're asking, doesn't make sense, right? And that way, we're defining the standards. The second thing you mentioned is the time. Now, if you teach what is the most important thing, there's no reason why you will not cover it and why you will not do the important thing. So again, it comes down to you saying, this is the scheme I've been given. How do I interpret this scheme? We need to be able to interpret the scheme appropriately, right? And deliver based on that interpretation. It is not about the school. At the end of the day, what the school wants is that these children are successful. If we can show that the children can be successful based on the way that we have analyzed our scheme, taken it apart and put it back together, I believe that our school leaders will be more than happy about it. I personally will be very happy. And I'm really quite, pleased with how my team works. They're able to see what they've been given, make it their own, and make it work in a better way. The third thing that you can do is something called integration. Okay. And unfortunately, this is not the session for integration, but integration is a critical tool. Critical tool. It drives not only student understanding, it deepens student understanding, and it helps you maximize learning time in your classroom. Right? What is integration? The concept of integration says that we do not teach in silos. Because I am teaching biro, I'm looking at this, it is a biro. But guess what? There are two colors on this biro. There is red, there is white on this biro. This biro also has a number attached to it. It is 1. So in terms of quantification, I'm holding 1 biro. The word biro is English. So B is B for biro. In terms of science, this biro is also a scientific object. This thing that it is inside, that this casing is plastic. Plastic is what? A material, right? And then, of course, it has a metal leg. So we need to be able to say what part of our subjects are integrated or can be integratable, right? So think about your payment solution. If you're using Uber, for example, you can pay by cash, but that cash came from where? It came from a bank. You can link your bank app to your card to your bank app, to your Uber app. What happens is that you have integrated 2 systems together. One is your transportation, one is your payment. So why do we teach in silos? You are looking at me right now. You are hearing my voice. You can see my glasses. You probably have seen the pictures behind me. You have seen that I'm wearing braids. Our brains do not work in silos. You don't look at Pastor Felix. I can see you. I can see your tie. I like the color of the tie. I can also see you're wearing a blue jacket. Maybe it's a suit, but I'm only seeing the jacket. All of these things, I've seen them just by looking at you. right? I've seen the background as well. So why do we teach children and we only want them to see social studies? It's impossible. They cannot only see social studies. In social studies, they see the mountains. The mountains are made up of rocks. What are those rocks? What are the chemical composition of those rocks? Right? What are the years, the history behind those rocks, the history behind the geographical phenomena that we are seeing? All of that is history. How about the language? Are we saying that it's not word-based, what the children are learning? Of course, it's word-based. So why are we not using geography, comprehension passages in English? So those are ways that we can begin to beat the time factor by integrating, right, Felix? So yes, I know that it seems like as if it's impractical, but I know it is practical. That's what I do in my system. And we're over 10 years old. So we've been doing it and it is working. Does it require a mindset shift? Oh, absolutely. But is it impossible? I don't believe in that word impossibility. I personally, I don't believe in it. I believe that I've just not found a way to crack it, right? So if you think about these three that I've given, I believe that it would help. But the one thing that I would say, two things that I would say drive towards what is really important for those children to learn. Highlight that. I loved a word that you used. You said, how do we make it visible? Make that visible. And then secondly, integrate. Integrate across the different curriculum area. You may not be able to integrate all the topics on your scheme of work, but you can integrate. And in integrating, you drive and deepen learning simultaneously across 2, sometimes 3 subject areas. And so that helps. Yeah. And what you've taught in one subject area, there's really no need to teach it again in second, because we have a lot of subject areas that are interconnected and we have repeated topics in them. Some are not so repeated. The concepts can be different, but some are exactly the same, literally. And so why don't we drive and deepen learning in those areas instead of reteaching it? Yeah, so those are ways that I believe that we can do things like this. I hope that helps, Felix.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, so we had Glory. Glory, you had a question as well.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. Thank you very much for this session. My network didn't really let me enjoy it, but it was really, really insightful. Yeah. Okay, so I have 2 questions. My first question is, you mentioned this round robin, and that was when I went off, and it sounded so interesting. So I don't know if you could explain it again, what the round robin is about. This is the first time I'm hearing it. And secondly, you said that summative assessment is tangible, while formative assessment is not tangible. I don't really understand that.
Okay, fantastic, great. So let me start with round robin. Round robin, and when you get the slides, it's very well explained in the slides. What round robin is a method where you give the children a concept, and then each child would, maybe sit in a circle or sitting on their seats, but each child has to contribute to that particular topic or that thing that they're talking about. Yes, and so they take it in turns to contribute, talk about it, and so that's the concept of round robin. And in talking about it, you have said, what am I measuring? So you need to know what you are measuring. Yeah, so are you measuring eloquence? Are you measuring the ability to connect that concept to something they've learned in class? Are you measuring, so you must be measuring something in round robin. It's formative, it's not tangible because you're not seeing the sum, right? So that's why we say it's non-tangible. There's no sum attached to it. You're only seeing the effects of what they are learning, and then you're correcting it as they go along. Yeah, so that's why that's what round robin is, and that's how you say summative is tangible, and formative is intangible. With summative, it's tangible because there's 5/10. I gave you 5 questions, you scored 4. So that's 4/10. I gave you 20, you scored 2. You got 2/20. That's tangible. Yeah, so that's what it means. Yeah. But you will get the slides and the recording. So that sort of will bring it home.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem, you're welcome.
In most schools, formative assessment, the midterm assessment is seen as a formative assessment for learning.
Okay.
And in our midterm assessment, the children are still graded. Even in most of our exit and entrance quizzes, our pop quizzes, children are still graded, and we are still measuring something like, okay, we want to know how well they understood this, maybe in the form of essay, but we are usually encouraged to grade them. So I'm still, and you saying summative assessment is tangible because it is graded, and then formative assessment is not because it is not graded. it's like you're just
once you're grading it, it becomes summative. Now, can you use a summative assessment formatively? 100%. I can take that summative
okay.
assessment and say yes, which is what a lot of schools do.
Okay,
I've graded
yes,
it,
yes.
but then I take it and I say, let me then use it with feedback. But in
Okay.
reality, you really shouldn't be grading a formative assessment. Even if you grade it, the children should not see the grades. Otherwise,
Oh,
it's
wow.
like it's summative because they feel under pressure to perform. But the very idea of formative is that it should be formative. The children should be able
Yes,
to
to correct.
exactly. It's correcting.
Yes.
They're not under that
Yes.
pressure to perform. You can see them in their real state and provide direct and raw feedback. So that's the purpose of a formative assessment.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. Thank
No
you. Thank you
problem,
very
no
much.
problem, no problem. Do we have any other questions?
Good evening, ma.
Good evening.
Yes, ma. Well done, ma.
Thanks, Chinwe. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, ma. Yes, ma. Please, ma, I have a question. How can we actually assess the preschool children? The best way to assess the preschool children, ma?
That's fantastic. That's another fantastic question. So the thing with preschool, generally speaking, right, is you have several different learning goals for preschool. So so it depends on the scheme that the curriculum that you're using, the curriculum framework. But if you're using the early years foundation stage, you would measure things like their movement. So their ability to hop on one leg, for example. The way to measure that is seeing them on the playground, right? And you pick up an activity and say, let's hop on one foot. Yeah, hop, hop, hop on one foot, hop, hop, hop on one foot, hop. You just create a song. And what you're then seeing is looking at the children and knowing who is hopping on one foot. And you're making anecdotal records and writing it down. With observation in preschool, to be honest, the best way is observatory. So let me share something quickly with you guys. We would share it. We'll give you guys like 2 slides really. Yeah, we'll give you 2 slides. Yes, one sort of has some other activities that you can use. Or we'll merge them together and find a way to get it to you. So for preschool, ways that you can assess is if you're matching colors, for example, in preschool you have a three-part learning format. You have this is, you have what is this, and you have this, you have show me. Kayode, can you please keep your mic muted? Thank you. Right, it's 3 parts. This is, so you are showing to them and say, oh, this is, and then you say, show me, and then they show you and say, what is this? Right, so that is the 3-part format, and that is the 3-part assessment tool in preschool. Right, so you are saying it to them first of all, they are gaining it, and then you ask them a question. The question is then show me color red, and then you'll be like, what is this? Right, is it an apple? Is it a tomato? Right, so those are ways that you're assessing them in preschool. What are you assessing is the question. Are you assessing their ability to recall, to remember the color, to remember that this is a tomato? Are you assessing their articulation? Bingo. B-I-N-G-O. Is that what you are assessing? Their mouth formation, their letter formation. Are you assessing that? Are you assessing their ability to relate with other children, right? To take turns. Those are all things that you're assessing. So you need to again say to yourself, in preschool, what are the goals? Based on the goals, then you have activities. Based on that activity, what is the success criteria? What is the assessment evidence that you want to see that the child has learned this thing? If you taught vegetables, fruits and vegetables, how do you know the child has learned fruits and vegetables? They should be able to name the fruit and the vegetable, show you the fruit and the vegetable, and tell you what it is when you show it to them. You're not writing it down, right? They should be able to do it. And then when they get home, the children should be able to talk about it at home. So tell the parents, oh, this is what we did in class today. Please show your child this fruit and vegetable. Let us know if they remembered it at home. So in preschool, you weave in the parents a lot in your assessment, but it's not necessarily about them writing, and some of those things are not necessary. Should they do it to develop motor skill? I would say yes, but I don't believe that they should be assessed on it. Yeah, another thing that you can do really, Chinwe, is, outdoor games, and these are all activity-based learning. Maybe I'll organize a preschool conference really one of these days, and it will be a physical conference so that we can come in and see things that we can do. And for something you can do is have assign numbers to the children and have these numbers scattered around the classroom, and you do like a treasure hunt and have them go around and look for their specific number. And what you're simply doing is checking that child can see that number somewhere else and pick it up and bring it back to you. Do it with colors as well. Those are all assessment tools. And somebody is making notes about those things that the children are doing. So those are assessment tools in preschool. They're mostly formative, right? They're not graded, but it really is driving home the point because it's 100% activity-based.
Okay, thank you, Ma. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Something that we can do, and that's if your school is open, because it takes some time for me to do that, is look at your curriculum and create an assessment format for it. Right? So I look at the curriculum, and that's something I do. I look at the curriculum that you have, like the scheme of work, and I create assessment activities and learning criteria for each activity. So that way the teachers know exactly what they're doing, and they're more intentional, more focused in the way that they're teaching it, so that they're sure that they're hitting those goals. So that's something that can be done as well, but you can't do it yourself. Yep. Any other question, guys?
Good evening, Mrs. KK. I have a question.
Good evening, Toby. Please go ahead.
Back to the summative and formative assessments in terms of the primary school, for homework and classwork. So do we mark it and then score, or do we skip the scoring? Because now when you said formative and you were using your hands and talking about form, all of a sudden I had a light bulb that, okay, that's what it means, formative, right? So could you please explain that, Ma?
So again, it really does depend on the system that you run. To be honest, there's no hard and fast rule. For homework, I would say that it should be, we should give feedback on it. Feedback to say, oh, this is what I've done. Maybe if you're grading it, because parents might want to see a grade, because again, sometimes things that we do in school are for show. Yes. So I understand that it's for show. Nobody marks it after my child did the homework. What you can do is maybe not use a red pen, use a different color pen, right? But give feedback that makes sense. Oh, so the way that you carried over this, not just seen, not just noted, good job. No, let us write feedback that actually helps the child improve. Yes, with that, because parents want to see, and there's nothing you can do, based on the fact that you work in a school. Parents want to see, and that's what your school has said you should do. You're going to have to do it. But how can we make it more meaningful for the students in our care? The way that we can do it is ensuring that the feedback that we are giving directly informs their ability to grow from that feedback. Yes, so that's something that you can do. Classwork, I would say, to be honest, you don't need to grade classwork, right? Because as they're doing it, the only challenge is why we grade it is that we don't have enough time. We haven't planned it properly. So we give classwork that will take 5 minutes. We do it before the end of the class. 5 minutes, the class is up, and then we cannot give feedback, so we grade it. But the way really it should be is that with every concept you teach, you should weave in a classroom activity, such that before you move on to the next set of your teaching, it's called an activity map. It's called a learning map. The same way a map would guide you, you should have a map that guides you in your classroom, and you have activity markers that you have placed in those places. And so what then happens is that when you give them an activity in class, instead of waiting till the end to give them 10 questions, give them 2 questions, two questions, maybe every 10 or 15 minutes. And then you can give feedback directly on that work that they did. One other way is let them switch papers and each mark one another. Yes, or give feedback on what one another has done. So those are ways that we can be. Toby, you want to say something?
No, I said fantastic. Thank you very much, ma'am.
No problem. All right. Any other questions? Okay. So it seems like we've had a good one. Thank you all so much. We will have this recording available to you. And yes, so thank you all so much and have an amazing evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Miss KK. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye, Miss KK. Thank you for the session.